Hi, everybody. You're listening to the good book Spoilercast for Godmother Night by Rachel Pollack. I'm Sam, and this is Nick, my cousin, and we're here to talk about A Godmother Night in a little more detail and talk about it with spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, stop listening now. Yeah, so here we are. So we wrote down a bunch of questions that we thought we'd like to talk about. This is a hell of a book. Okay. Who was the girl at the end?
Okay.
Because that's what I Googled after this book. I was like, Who is this girl?
And then the whole entire Google is like, no one knows what this book is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got some theories. Do you want?
I want to hear your theories.
Okay. So, I mean, look, there's a few possibilities, right? Okay, one possibility is that this is Jake reborn as a young girl. I don't totally buy into that, but I think, at the end, the girl says to Laurie, "Can we live happily ever after now?" And obviously that's like a fairy tale sort of trope of like, the people in love live happily ever after. That's a possibility. That's not where I land. Another possibility is obviously Laurie has been through a lot of shit in this book, right? And Laurie is there and she is able to unload her anger on Mother Night, and Mother Night tells her a lot of things she needs to hear. She kind of apologizes to her for the degree to which she kind of meddled in her relationships. She tells her that it's not her time and that she didn't take Jake and Kate, but that she doesn't have control over this. This is just how the world works.
Yeah.
And she tells her, I think most importantly, that she was a great mother and that even if she had wanted to come between her and Kate, she couldn't have because she was such a great mom and she was so wonderful to Kate, which that scene did make me feel really emotional just because to me, Laurie is the protagonist of the story, which we can get to later. So I think just the idea that this girl is representing, there's a scene earlier where Laurie sees a girl and she's not in yellow overalls, but she's in, she's got moons and shit on her clothes, and she's playing hopscotch late at night. So
right, yes.
Yeah, this is not just a normal child of the physical world. And
that's how you know it's magical realism.
Yeah, and she keeps throwing a bone onto the hopscotch court and trying to go through and then hopping back, and she's getting really frustrated. And it seems like the goal is to get through to the other side. And so, I don't know, maybe something about like Laurie having all of this self-doubt and all of these hang-ups throughout the book, and now this is representing the resolution of all of that. And now she can kind of like, that's another idea. I also am not subscribing to that, although I think there's a very real possibility.
All right, so what's your hunch here?
Yeah, so I think that this is part Jake, this is part Kate, and I don't totally have a ton of evidence for that, other than I don't think it makes sense for it to just be Jake. I think Kate is a similar loss. Right before Laurie goes to the bridge, she hears Kate and Jake talking on the radio, and because we learned that the dead can sort of broadcast on the radio, but people don't know how to listen to it anymore.
Right.
And we know that they both were involved in the bone handling, right? So Jake helped the girl at the beginning bury the bones, and then later on, Laurie is there when the bones are dug up. And there's a rock exchange in both of those. So they both seem to be part of it. And there's a part, let me pull up my notes here. So Mother Night takes Kate. This is when Kate's a child and Mother Night used to pick her up from school.
Right.
They're at a house and they open a window and they see a star that's dying. And Kate doesn't think a star can die. Mother Night explains that everything dies, and, so Kate's like, what happens? And so Mother Night says, first it blows up, a little bit like a balloon, if you blow in it for too long. Can you picture that, Kate? Kate stares harder out the window, she nods. Good, her godmother said. However, it's after the explosion that the truly interesting part begins. The bits from the star go floating through space for a long time. Sometimes nothing happens to them. But sometimes, she paused to make sure that Kate would give her full attention. Sometimes they join with bits from other dead stars, and together they all form a new star, healthy, young, and all full of energy.
Okay. Yeah, why would that be there? Why would that be there if it didn't mean something?
Yeah, and then Mother Night is like, so you see, Kate, you and all of us and everyone and your friends and everything are all made from the same dying stars. And obviously that is like a thing, and I could totally see Rachel Pollack like talking about that, but that is so kind of like precisely worded that that's who I think that girl is.
I had been assuming it was something simpler, but you've presented me with the evidence, and it makes a lot of sense to me. That is the kind of resolution that Pollock might want to put here because it ties the entire story together. Because if it's just Jake, then you wonder, what about Kate? Yep. If it's just Kate, you wonder, what about Jake? In terms of the radio thing, this is a very surreal, magical, realist story, and I could totally buy Kate or Jake being on the radio and being the kid at the same time. But I think taking some part of both of them and having it be something entirely new too. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about in part one. Like, I think some parts of the book are very clear. This is one of those where, like, we're not sure, right? And Pollock talks in her general teachings the idea that, like, you need to look at the archetypes, you need to look at the symbols that are in front of you, and you need to trust your intuition, and that's what I'm doing here.
You know, Pollock's telling us to trust our instincts and trust what's in front of us. I think that's the author telling it straight up right there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you think Laurie's the protagonist. I want to know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jake is the real foil here. Like, Jake is probably everyone's first instinct and probably was mine at first, because she's the first POV that we get, and then she has the child. But I just feel like Laurie went through all of these changes, you know, and just knowing that this book is very much about, like, your identity not being fixed and, you know, the idea of spiritual journey and leaving your old self behind and moving forward. And to me, Laurie did that so many times, you know, like, I feel like she did it when she totally changed herself, obviously, when she and Jake started being together. And then she had this thing where she was going to grad school to do women's studies, and that was her path, and then leaving that behind, and then forging this new path. And then obviously she had no interest in children whatsoever, but she was able to, like, leave that behind and then, like, fully give herself to this new endeavor. And I think she was anyways, but then obviously she ended up with no choice. But that is not even true, right? Because, like, she did have a choice, because Jake's parents were trying to take Kate and she fought for her. And then to lose them at the end, and still, you know, she built so much resilience through the book, and she embodied all of these ideas that Pollock really pushes. And she's the only character that we actually get throughout the book also, besides Mother Night's not the protagonist, I don't think. So,
no.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I, like a lot of people, I had also thought Jake at first. That was my instinct. That's really the first character you hear about. I connected first to her, but Jake dies. We lose Jake halfway through the book, not even halfway. And now that you're calling Jake the foil to Laurie, really that rings true to me, because Laurie is experiencing the world in relation to Jake, and for a while it's a give and take, but it's really Laurie's story. It's Laurie's story from Jake's point of view for a certain part. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I read the issue of Doom Patrol, because that was fun. But I wasn't going to read the 78 Steps to Wisdom, but I tried to read a lot of reviews of it just to really kind of wrap my head around what people are getting from that book. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, I was stuck in my life. I was ready to end my life, all this stuff. And this book gave me what I need to push forward. And if we just think about Laurie, she's facing that multiple times in this book. She's in that situation. So anyways, yeah, that's, to me, and I think especially, I ended up reading it a second time. And that really, I mean, the second time through, when you kind of know what's coming, you are feeling for Laurie the whole time.
Wow. I got to reread it now too. Not right. I have a couple more books that we've committed to before I'm going to read it. But it is definitely it's a book you can reread and it'll hit you again.
For sure.
Okay. I think this is an important question that we didn't address in the review because it can give away things. But when we were researching online, we discovered that the AIDS epidemic was happening at the same time as this story. And how do you feel that factored in? A lot, because even though it's not explicitly mentioned in the book.
It's, yeah, I mean, it definitely, it was part of Pollock's experience for sure. You know, if we think in 1994, AIDS was the leading killer of Americans ages 25 to 44. And from 92 to 94, I believe it was the leading killer of all men, certainly men in that age group. And in 1994, like I said, all Americans in that age group. So, this is something that she was, you know, the fight for there to be more action taken was something that she was directly involved with and affected by. And obviously, this is a time when people are dying very young and people are being sort of like the idea of this like very jarring loss of people far too soon. And the idea that, yeah, it's really unfair and people all have to sort of deal with the collective like grief and trauma of that. I feel like that is something that is very much woven into this story. The fact that, you know, with Jake's death especially, I feel like Jake's death is like, because it's the first one of the book, it's very jarring, and we know that Jake is a little bit afraid of Mother Night because of some of the things that have happened, but like I wasn't ready for her to die, right? Like when that happened,
No.
I was just like, woo, okay, wow, this is like,
Yeah.
this just got really serious. And I think so I just think like the dynamics of the book and the way that people are taken very young, and there's a lot of tension around like who else is going to be killed and who's going to die. I think there's there, but there's also some pretty direct references. So
Okay.
this isn't a direct quote, this is just me writing down some notes, but
Yeah, please.
so when spring comes and she talks about in the city's largest church, women dressed up as gargoyles and ran up and down the aisles shouting murderer at the priest. They threw fake blood on the organ and the altars and the statues of the saints. And then we learn that 5 months have passed, and then young men dressed up as medieval fools broke into corporate meetings to invite the executives to a dance of life, a procession against a disease. And so it seems there are some pretty major, like procession against disease, obviously, right? But then there's some pretty major events. So ACT UP was the big group that was staging a lot of these rallies and protests. And there's an event called Stop the Church in 1989 at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. And they had 7,000 protesters at this event. ACT UP was there officially to combat the church's stance against safe-sex education. So the Catholic Church was still and would be for many years against safe-sex education and against distributing condoms to help curb the spread of AIDS. So they were there for that, and then also WHAM, which was Women's Health in Action Mobilization. They were also there to protest the church's anti-abortion stance. So they walked into this service. They did a die-in at the service, and they were calling the priest a murderer, I think mostly because of this anti-condom stance. Someone got communion and crumpled it up, and then lied down to try and keep others from being able to get it. Over 100 people were arrested. And then there was another ACT UP demonstration on Broadway and Wall Street. That was a really big die-in. And then in 1989 at the New York Stock Exchange, and these two were both aimed at trying to get drug companies to lower the price of AZT. Let's see, I have here, so 4 days after the second one, 4 days after the New York Stock Exchange event, the price was actually lowered significantly.
Wow.
Yeah, so those seem to be like really kind of seminal moments, and so I'm wondering if that's sort of what she's referencing there. But yeah, it seems pretty clear, given the activism that she engaged in, that this would have been something she was involved with, and many people have alluded to it. I couldn't find anything of her talking about it, but other people alluded to it, and I think like I said, I think the cadence of the book and some of the themes that are discussed are there. And there's really, to me, this idea of being, I think when someone dies when they're much older, right, that's one thing. And obviously, I think that's something that people still fear, and, but I think when it's young, I think it's not just the fear of death. I think there's this like desperation about like, was my life meaningless? Like what was the point of it when you're young? And like, I think about the scene in the market with the dead people in the market and trying to get people to take their stuff, and just, it's like this idea of like being so tied to what you have here and what you have in this world. And the idea that your stuff would be there and not be being used is like almost meaning that like your life was meaningless. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. They're
I think
desperate
that's tied to it too.
to find meaning in their life and to see what they own to be used again and to live through that in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, that part really hit me, man. Just thinking about that connections piece and just seeing these people, and it's like this animosity they had towards, I think they called them the non-dead because they feel completely ignored, you know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was a really powerful part of the book, and it's just such an interesting idea to me too that children can see the dead because their mind is open to it. There's a bit of a tangent here, but that's something you see. We're talking about Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett too, one of my favorite authors, where like there's like crazy stuff happening, there's magical things happening around you, but you're not used to it, so your mind just filters it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this idea that the dead are there, and if you were open to the experience, you could see them and talk to them. It's very powerful and very cool.
Yeah, and one of our big questions was, has this book changed the way you think about death and the way you think about grief? And I don't know if it's necessarily changed the way I think about death, but I think when I think about grief, when I think about people who I've lost something, and I feel guilty about it sometimes. I feel like I have things, right? Like I actually have a binder where I've got eulogies that my dad gave for his brother and sister. I've got a eulogy that my mom gave for her sister. I've got a eulogy that I gave for my best friend who passed in 2016. And I have it, and it's in a drawer, right? Mm-hmm. And that friend of mine, I actually have a journal of his that I haven't read because I just have not felt ready for that, you know? And I sometimes feel guilty because it's not that I don't think about these people, like things will come up and I will think about them, but I think I am reluctant in my day-to-day to really intentionally think of them, whether it's like because I'm trying to like, you know, I got kids, I got a job, I'm trying to like move through and keep my momentum and I don't want to like take time for that, or if it's like I don't want to talk to people about it because, you know, because sometimes that can be weird, right? Because people don't talk about this stuff, and so
makes
like,
people uncomfortable.
Sure. And
or you're worried it will, maybe. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it did just make me think, like, regardless of whether or not I believe that they're actually there, that desperate need that those dead people at the market have is real, and that they want their lives, the time that they were on Earth, to have meaning. And I feel like the way that it has meaning is that you have the people who you were connected to who are still on Earth are carrying that forward, right? And when I think about like my own death someday, I would love it to be that my kids are thinking of me and feeling happy or having good memories, or maybe having some things of mine that they still think about. And so it hasn't changed any of my behavior because it's still pretty recent that I finished it, but like it has made me mentally just more open to the idea that all the people, right, like our grandparents, right, like we're great people and on both sides, and you know that like I should maybe spend a little more time thinking about those people, and when those thoughts come up, just taking a little more time with them and maybe talking about them more. Even if it's just to my kids, right? Letting them know, like, oh, here's what your great-grandparents were like. Here, you know what I mean? Because to me, that is like a way that they do have more meaning, is if that, you know, like it's almost like I have my own reasons for not talking about it and not thinking about it enough, but I feel guilty because it's like, well, if they knew that, then it would be hard for that to not feel like I'm making their existence less, you know? So anyways, that's a long tangent, but it's made me think a lot about that.
I love that, and I felt very similarly. It's made me think a lot about mortality, and I've experienced my share of loss too, like anybody. Yeah, we all have, but the idea of death as a transition rather than an ending, and the embodiment of death as a loving and welcoming being rather than something to be feared, something empty, is just. I also feel guilt for not thinking constantly of many of the people I've loved who've passed away. But there are some more recent ones that I carry with me and I still think about. And I don't know, that kind of eases that a little bit. It makes me feel a little better. And related to this, As you were talking about the market, it reminded me that my uncle, who passed away a few years ago, had over 100 different issues of Cooks Illustrated. He was a fantastic cook, something we really connected over. So I kept those because I felt like if I got rid of them, similar to the people in the market, he would be upset somehow. You know what I mean? And I also wanted, but also to me, holding on to them is part of how I carry on his memory. But I also feel like maybe it's time to do something about those and carry on his memory in more healthy ways. Uh, than 100 magazines that I don't read.
If when I tell you, when people tell me, and I'm not saying that I'm judging them, but like sometimes people will tell me like, oh yeah, well, my so and so passed away, and I still talk to them every day, and and outwardly I say, oh cool, but inwardly I'm sort of like, okay, well, I
Sure.
don't know if you right, but then I'm like, maybe that is actually healthier than what I do, right? My best friend that passed away at 16, all the time things happen, and I still sometimes feel the urge to text him, right?
Right, yeah. He's still
And I'm
alive, like there in your head.
yeah,
He's
and I'm
alive
like,
there.
oh, you idiot! Like, what are you talking about? Like, what? But maybe instead of that, I should like. I'm not saying I'm going to text him, but maybe I should like carry that thought through in my head. Like, hey, man, this just happened, and I thought about this time when we were 15 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe that would be, even if it has no communication through to the other side or whatever, right? Because, we would maybe need Rachel Pollack here to talk about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
She could help us with that.
for me to go through that and talk about it and to myself, and then maybe sometimes, like occasionally when I'm with my family, something will come up naturally that involves him, and I will bring it up, and like it is his life having meaning, right? That is like we're
Yes.
talking about. It's the thing, and I think that is something I didn't appreciate enough. That market scene really like was very like, as something that wasn't super connected to the overall plot of the story, I found that to be a very emotionally jarring sort of scene.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, talking with you about it and hearing your perspective is making me think about it a lot more because it's not something that I really clocked when I read it, as that. Yeah, I have a question as a fellow parent. So the whole section with baby Kate and the sleepless nights
Yeah.
and Jake, how did that make you feel as a fellow parent? Addendum question: could Jake have maybe avoided her fate, quote unquote, by sleep training Kate?
That,
Or maybe by actually going to a doctor when
right,
she
right.
injured herself like a normal person?
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that? Because to me, that is one part where I feel like just what she did didn't make sense to me.
100%. Yes, 100% yes. Even if the sleep training didn't work, you could put her down and let her cry
Yes.
and go to the bathroom, or like put her down and let her cry and wash her hands. And I know like we are not moms, and I
Yeah.
understand that it's a different sort of pull.
And there is such a thing as postpartum depression, and there's a lot of mental health struggles
Sure.
that moms
Yeah, yeah,
can go
yeah.
through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think either of us are like judging Jake for it.
No.
But I do think even the first time I read it, even not knowing that she was going to die, I think Jake and Laurie are, well, Jake was a little bit idealistic, right? Like I feel like Laurie was trying to bring up some valid concerns, and Jake was like, "Nope, we're doing this. People all
Yes.
around the world do this. We're doing it, right?" And I guess Laurie was in a way too, because Laurie was like, "No, I'm just going to work at the bookstore." And to be fair, that ended up working out in the end. But
Yeah.
I yeah, and then there was just a lot of communication issues between them, and that doesn't make me, I believe that they were deeply in love, but I think it's hard, and I can relate to some of it, right? Like some of what Laurie was going through is real, right? When you're like, damn, I'm so tired, like I can't believe how much my life has changed, and
Yeah.
I wanted children, right? And Laurie didn't, so like for her it's even more, but but then to also be like, oh, but what I'm going through is nothing compared to what my partner, the birth mother, is going through, right?
Mhm.
Um, and
There's
so
a
I
lot of
think that was
self-sacrificing there.
Yeah, but like the fact that like Lori wasn't willing to communicate more with Jake about that, and the fact that Jake was hiding the fact that she had this infection on her hand, like that was, I mean, obviously, right? I mean, obviously, we know.
Like, just tell your partner, hey, I seriously injured myself. Maybe I should go to a doctor. Maybe I should at least clean the cut properly. That the parenting, the sleeping, that I think I can forgive and understand. There's, in some ways that was very human, these communication issues and these two parents who are far from perfect and are really struggling to figure out what to do. But the cut thing, it's just like that's basic sense.
Right. I mean, I can tell you for sure, if my wife or I had a cut that we thought was getting infected, we would 1,000% be like, hey, this is serious. We need to deal with this. Right. Yeah.
It felt to me like the time that when you're hiding a cut like that, that's a zombie movie plot where you've been bit by a zombie and you don't want anyone to know and you're hoping it'll go away.
Yeah.
This is she accidentally cut herself with a can.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like the group can't know. They'll send me out in the street.
Yeah, like Laurie would just be like, go to a fucking hospital, Jake. Like, let's take you to the ER.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say it does make me wonder something that's not clear
Mm-hmm.
is how much influence does Mother Night have over the things that happen?
Right. Yes.
Because we know that, like, and this goes all the way back to the beginning, right? We know that Lori wasn't that into going to this dance at the college because she didn't know what she was going to dress up as. And then she comes across these bones on the lawn, and then she does know what she's going to dress up as. And then Jake wasn't going at all, but for some reason, she felt moved to go outside of her dorm room. And then outside, she saw the limo, and then she wanted to go see Mother Night. And so, like, these things happen, right? I don't know. It just seemed like, I mean, Jake did seem like the kind of person who completely, I mean, like, there is, like, being selfless, and then there is, like, a super unhealthy version of that. Like when nobody needs you to be that way, you are that way.
And people are like that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And wonderful people are like that, right? I mean, Jake
Yes.
seems like a wonderful person, right? But the idea of, like, no matter what, I will do what this child needs me to do, no matter what, and I will do what Laurie. I mean, Jake is dying from an infection, and she just peed the bed, and she's dizzy, and she's telling Laurie, like, hey, you should go out for a beer. But the thing that really made me wonder was, like, one, it was such an extreme, like, lack of prudence with this stuff on Jake's part. And the other thing is that as soon as Jake dies, Kate stops crying. Like, Jake dies, and then Laurie, and part of that may be that now Mother Night is Kate's godmother. But, like, either way, that's Mother Night having some influence over how these things play out.
I've been thinking about this too. Does she have influence, or is she executing what happens in the beginning? And at this point, I really felt like she had a lot of influence and this was her doing. But by the end of the book, I feel like, I mean, she was almost sad about when she was with Laurie on that bridge. I felt, if I'm remembering correctly, more often than not, she was only following the choices that Laurie and Kate and Jake made and responding to them. And this is part of it that's very fairy tale like, is that, like, Laurie makes the decision and asks Mother Night to be there, but does not know the consequences of that decision. They're Laurie and Kate and Jake are playing with life and death here and making requests and decisions without really knowing what it means.
Yeah, I mean, so
and Mother Night doesn't tell them, so that she has power here. She could say, hey, just so you know, I'm going to kill your girlfriend.
right.
Or your girlfriend's going to die if you do this.
Right.
But
yeah,
I don't think
or
she can. I feel like she would if she couldn't. So I don't know. You know what I mean?
She's a really hard character to parse out.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe just the nature of being, like, the embodiment of death, but also being someone who is trying to protect people. Which, by the way, before I go through, similar, I feel like Pratchett does a very similar thing.
Yes. Yeah, with his death character.
Yeah. Because we always hear that character saying, like, fair or unfair doesn't matter, and, like, that he's not the one killing people, it's just his job. So Okay, so we find out that, so Jake is dead, and we find out that Kate never cried without purpose again. And it says of Laurie, basically it says Laurie didn't notice this or question it. She only knew that her daughter was laughing, and the sight of this miracle opened her heart with joy, even as pain rocked her back and forth. So there's a sense there, it almost feels like if she had thought about it a little more, she might have wondered, you know what I mean? A few things with Mother Night. So, and I tend to fall a little more where you are. I tend to fall on the side of like, I don't think Mother Night is this like evil figure who's like trying to collect deaths and doing this, especially because we know that she brings people back. Because when Jake goes to see her to ask about revenge against Laurie's dad, she sees all these people being brought back from the dead, and Mother Night says like, oh, well, you came all this way, I wanted you to have a show, but also that was work that needed to be done. And obviously I think whatever it was that brought that girl to Laurie, whatever she was, that was Mother Night's doing. But a few things that are like feel nefarious or questionable are one, like when Laurie's doing her papers, Mother Night is not herself, right? She is like the barmaid. That's probably not a
no. She's like an old lady
term
at the bar.
Okay. I was thinking she was pouring the drinks. Okay, so she's like an old lady at the bar.
Oh, maybe she was.
Yeah, I don't totally know. I don't remember that. Yeah. But when you reread it, you can tell me.
Yeah.
So in that case, she dresses up like someone else. She gets Laurie to let her write the papers. Doesn't tell her until after that, like, oh no, you can't pay me. You'll owe me a favor someday. And then later on, when Jake goes to her and wants revenge on Laurie's dad, Jake says like, I want justice, and Mother Night says, I understand, do you? And Jake doesn't, she's fired up, she's come all this way, she is like doing this, right? And so that's a good question, like, can Mother Night, is she allowed to tell her how this works or is she not? And then when Jake asks, right, when Jake is dying, she says, like, why couldn't you, basically she says, like, is that what happened? Like, is this like a swap? And Mother Night says, like, no, you made the decision that was the best thing for you and for Laurie, which is probably true, right? Like, probably not killing Laurie's dad was, I have to think that would have taken their relationship in a different direction. And
probably.
Yeah, and then but then like with the Kate thing, here's what I wonder, and I'm a little hesitant just to say this because I don't want to excuse the behavior of Laurie's dad, right? Laurie's dad was obviously like a really bad person, and especially like once we get his POV and we're here, like obviously like the story up until then is that like he's this great guy who's so open-minded and treats women so well, and then like once we get into his internal POV, it's like, ooh, okay, that's all, he's like a monster. He's like a monster on the inside, right? But Jake, because I think there's some mythic like going down into the underworld type of parallels here, but like Jake has Mother Night's protection, but then she chooses to insert herself into these doings, right?
Mm-hmm.
They could have just cut Laurie's family out. They could have told the police. There's lots of things they could have done, right?
Yes.
This was a decision that, and I wondered, Jake was really sick after this, and it could have been that she had kind of been through some trauma, but it could have also been like maybe there's a cost that comes with crossing over like that, because when she comes back, Laurie has to go through this ritual with her to bring her back into the land of the living. And so it's like, I'm just wondering, like I think balance is a really big theme of this, right? And so it's like, okay, if Mother Night is people have to make their choices, right? I imagine Mother Night's not allowed to put her thumb on the scales in that sense. So if once Jake decides to do that and then decides to spare the dad, if that then somehow, if the rules are such that then that now means like Jake is now there, maybe there's not much more that I can do. Much like with Kate. I mean, if Kate had just accepted that Mother Night was at the head of Melissa's dad's bed, and so that meant, okay, he's dead, there's nothing I can do. Yeah. There goes. But instead and in a moment, it's also like, it's like a moment of ego for both of them, for Jake and for Kate, to do this. And then like, obviously we know she turns the bed around. And then now that means Melissa's up, and then like she doesn't want Melissa, so the swap out comes, and this is what we get. So I guess like the thing with Laurie is tricky, but it's totally possible that Mother Night's goal was just to be Kate's godmother, because for whatever reason she has chosen Jake as this person that she'll be protecting or whatever else, right?
I do think there is whatever control Mother Night has. She has an affection for Jake and Kate that is not entirely explained, except she wanted to have a goddaughter, and she hasn't had one for a while. And that also, now that's connecting back to Terry Pratchett, where Death wants to have a kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
just because he wants to be a little more human.
Right.
I'm sure Pollock and Pratchett were familiar with each other. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, especially if she was friends with Neil Gaiman, for sure.
Yeah, because those two were pretty close too. On one hand, I feel like if you allow people to ask for things, but you don't tell them what the cost is, there's businesses here that do that, and those are called payday loan centers, and they're not very popular. But I feel like Mother Night is not nefarious. I do not get any sense of trying to manipulate or put one over on these people. So I have to think there's limitations to what she can tell them. Not to, and part of this book is there's a lot of things that are nebulous and that we just don't, you're just left not totally knowing. And I don't think we're really going to know that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's a ton of stuff that it would actually surprise me a little bit. I took a look online, like a used book site. They were selling it for like $35 or something. And I turned around just to look at the back cover, and someone mentioned that there's this like very academic bent to the book. And it's interesting. Like, I don't think you or I are the person to do it, but like someone should do a podcast just like unpacking all of the symbolism in the book.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Like I wrote down just when this jumped out to me, but there's a allusion to like the Hopi snake dances, right? There's a water purification indigenous ceremony that's there. There's this reference to, when Jake wants to find Mother Night and Mark tells her she needs to kill a dragon and taste its blood, and then she'll be able to talk to the birds. That's from a Norse myth.
Wow. Yeah.
I just learned today that in tarot, the Six of Swords card is essentially the boat that is on those stones. Yeah, and it's like one side the water is rough and on one side it's calm, which is exactly what it was in Jake's dream when she was on it, and that it's about a transition and leaving behind sort of chaos and transitioning to a more calm. But it also seems like in some interpretations I read that like the circumstances are not necessarily happy when that transition happens. And so I feel like this is just like another way in which, and I know that like this is true of most books, there's always like more we can dig out from them, but I feel like in this one it's just like there's so much there that I think we can like take with us for our life, but then there's so many more layers to it that I don't have the expertise or the background knowledge to even begin to have a discussion about.
You could do a college class on this book. I would love to attend that class, but I would not be the one to teach it.
No.
Yeah. The motif that stood out to me on that front, though, with my limited knowledge, was I felt like there were a lot of references to Orpheus and Eurydice, where you have scenes where one character is bringing the other one back across that threshold and going through this ordeal to do so. The first place I noticed it was Jake at the bus stop. You're running into these weird characters who are giving you things and just some of the things that people say to her are bizarre in a way that only makes sense in that context. But then you get where Jake is sick and Laurie has to go through this whole rigmarole to bring her back. And so you have the opposite, from a different perspective. And there are others too, which I'm just blanking on now, of course, that we're actually recording.
And in that, Laurie at first had Jake put like a black blindfold on.
And the blindfold thing.
Yeah,
yes.
And it was like in the moment, it was like you need to accept where you are. I think this also fits in one of Pollock's messages, which is like accept where you are.
Yes.
Leave it behind and step forward.
I think that is the biggest message of the book. Now that you're saying it, because when they mess up, they try to change fate, they're trying to change fate. They're looking back. They're trying to change what has happened. Yeah. And redirect history, go down the other trouser of time, as Terry Pratchett would put it. I gotta stop making Terry Pratchett references.
No, never.
But yeah, those are the points, and every time they do that, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
And Mother Night is really there just carrying out that consequence with a lot of compassion.
It made me think of that story that I think a really terrible movie was made out of. Just the dilemma of like, if you press this button, you'll win $1 million, but someone you don't know will die. And so you're like, okay, so you go ahead and press it, and then it's like, okay, well now I'll go bring this to somebody else, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, they said, oh shit, right? And then I feel like they made it into a movie that I saw like 20 years ago, and then it got really weird and lost the simplicity of it that I thought was powerful. But like, I had that thought when I was thinking about Mother Night of just, okay, yeah, like even in that, first of all, I mean, I think we agree on this because the candle scenes are incredible, right? Like
Oh
the
my God.
candles in the hospital parking lot, like that was like all over the cars and stuff, like that was so cool.
Yes, yes.
But something I caught the second time was that they save Melissa, and then Kate sees that now her candle is about to go out, and so she's like, well, what? No, that's not what this was, right? Like this was supposed to be we save Melissa so that she and I can be together, and so then Mother Night is like, okay, well then who should we? Basically,
That's right.
like
Who should we kill?
So like, who should we replace you with? And she's like, anyone, whoever it is. And Mother Night basically says like, okay, well, what about this person? Like, this person is a poet who is working on a poem about the secrets of creation.
Yes.
And if he should go
and that's the father.
Yes,
That's her father.
Yes, that is Kate's dad, the person who fathers her, which she doesn't know, right? Because they had that information for her in an envelope, but she chose not to open it, which, not that whatever, that's not the point. I think that just the point is, I think it's trying to just, again, like you said, emphasize this point that, like, you can't try to go back and change these things, right? Like that's it. So that was something I didn't pick up the first time, just that, like, that person that Kate would have had sub in for her to die instead is the person who fathered her. It's just wild. There's a lot of layers. But this book, it's so heavy and it's like so emotional, but I also thought it was just like really fun. I really enjoyed it a lot.
I loved this book. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we figured out what the big message of the book is by the end of our podcast. But that's what this conversation's about. We really started off with a bang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminder to people that if you want to be prepared for our next episode, we're reading Silver Street by E. Richard Johnson.
That's right. Yep. It's a fun little book. It is also hard to find. You can get it. I ended up just ordering a copy. You can find copies of it on like eBay and stuff. And I would check your library. What did you do, Nick?
Some libraries have it. My 1 year buy didn't have it. And there were some online sites that had used copies. I actually ended up, not what I was expecting, but I looked it up on Amazon, and there was a used copy for $3.99.
Oh.
And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm just going to hop on that right now. And then, well, never mind. I don't want to get into how I felt about it.
Let's
save it for next episode.
Let's tie this up. We hope you're waiting with bated breath to learn about our takes on Silver Street. And thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.